Humanity has always been beset by countless enemies: the treacherous heretic, the vile Xenos, and the ungodly demon. The Imperium has held up for thousands of years, but that's all going to change, for an inevitable secret has been uncovered: the failure of the Golden Throne. The death of the Emperor will soon arrive, and with it, so too will the Astronomicon fall. These pillars of hope will send humanity to the depths of despair. As the Emperor draws his last breath, Magnus the Red senses that the time for chaos to rise will soon be at hand, and the gods have set their sights on holy Terra. With the death of the Emperor, the Adeptus Custodes were recalled back to Terra to defend the tomb where the Emperor lies, under the Imperial Palace, from the many warp gates that have spawned after his death. As they protect the corpse of the Emperor, the Terran Genestealer cults have begun launching multiple hit-and-run assaults all across the world. But all that pales in comparison to the new looming threat coming their way: the many tendrils of the hive mind. The Imperial Guard has been stretched far too wide and thin. Casualties are at an all-time high, and morale is at an all-time low. Entire regiments have begun to desert their posts. The Guard have a saying: victory is measured in blood, yours and the enemy's. But now it seems that the Astra Militarum has no more blood left to give. With their Emperor-given miracles taken from them, the Sisters of Battle have begun to question their faith. Many orders have renounced their devotion to their god, and have turned their prayers towards the ruinous powers of chaos. The few who still believe began a crusade back towards Terra. All the while, Saint Celestine is nowhere to be found. News of the Emperor's death spread like wildfire, and the High Lords began to take action. Many fortified their positions to keep their power by allying with Xenos, while others found it easier to become a pawn of chaos. Luckily, the many eyes and ears of the Inquisition took notice. Various assassins were dispatched to quell rebellions or would-be heretics, but one High Lord managed to rally a sector of space, all for his own, via the might of the Minotaur chapter. The Adeptus Ministorum held strong during their darkest times, but many priests heard the voice of their god Emperor after his death. Whether this really was the Emperor or some other force remains to be a mystery, but the Imperial Creed held on. Shrine worlds became beacons of hope for untold trillions of people, many of them being former guardsmen. Entire worlds would embark on pilgrimages in hopes of salvation, but most never reached their destination. Upon the death of the Emperor, the Sisters of Silence were ordered to be stationed on various locations on Terra to create a matrix of anti-warp energy. At any given time, 6 untouchables were to stand vigil, protecting the tomb of the Emperor. The final guardians of mankind, the Space Marines, the saviors of last resort. Most kept to their Emperor-given vow, the defense of humanity. Their time was occupied either fighting against the creeping Tyranid threat, the newly spawned Black Orcs from the Octaria sector, or the Silent Kings United Necron Alliance. Under the leadership of Roboot Gilliman and Lionel Johnson, who had awoke after Dante of the Blood Angels slew Abaddon the Despoiler after succumbing to the Black Rage. With 2 Primarchs leading the last hope of humanity, the Imperium held for 665 days after the death of the Emperor. But on the 666th, the Space Marines knew fear. The largest collective chaos force ever seen spilled out from the Cicatrix Maledictum. Countless demons of the 4 Chaos Gods marched in tandem, ignoring their grudges, for one goal: the retrieval of the Emperor's corpse. for his body would be used as a conduit to hold the soul of the recently deceased Abaddon the Despoiler, and through him, Khorne, Nurgle, Slaanesh, and Tzeentch could possess and enter real space. To make this goal attainable, the apocalyptic army of chaos was led by none other than the demon Primarchs, Magnus, Fulgrim, Perturabo, Angron, Mortarion, and Lorgar. The psychic backlash from the Imperium's demonic horde alerted the ancient Eldari that now was the time to strike at their most hated enemy, she who thirsts. The ancient Eldari had once tasted glory, but now this dying race has been unified by the words spoken from Yvraine, preaching that all Eldari paths lead to one goal, the death of Slaanesh. She has rallied forth the Exodites, the Harlequins, the Asuryani, and even Vect and his Drukhari to this cause. But before the chaos god of lust and perfection can be destroyed, they need to prepare. Wraithbone constructs were created in mass and outfitted with every spirit stone in their possession, from every craft world. The Exodites brought forth hordes of their dinosaur-like mounts, while the Drukhari emptied their colosseums and pain pits of warriors and slaves. And finally, the avatars of Cain, Ennead, and Segura were awoken to march into battle once again. A key part of Yvraine's plan was to attain the 5 fingers of Morai Heg, aka the Crone Swords. 4 were already in their possession, but to retrieve the 5th, they had to enter Slaanesh's palace first. As such, the unified Eldari army had chosen its generals. The Visarch, wielder of the Sword of Silent Screams, which absorbs its foe's life essence. Yvraine, wielder of the Sword of Sorrows, that burns its victims to ash. The Incarn, which wields the Sword of Souls, the largest blade that is capable of shape-shifting. Prince Yariel, wielder of the Spear of Twilight, that uses its own wielder's soul to slay its enemies. And the last general, Hasubel Vect, which boasts that he has a secret weapon far superior to any Crone Sword. With the groundwork laid out, only one more piece of the puzzle was needed before they would slay Slaanesh, and that is the retrieval of their goddess of life, Isha. They entered into Nurgle's domain through the use of their webway, and due to the Chaos God's assault on Terra, his defenses were weakened. The trek through Nurgle's garden was costly, but they paved their way via psychic onslaught, and before long, they had found their goddess. Blocking their way stood 7 greater demons of Nurgle, each one more ugly and rotting than the last. At this point, Vect had had enough of sullying his own blades in the filth of Nurgle's desidents. It was time to unsheath his secret weapon. He called forth Urien Rakoth, which gave Vect a runic tetrahedron, and upon placing it on the plague-ridden ground, a dark gate manifested. A wheezing giant of a man shambled out. Grunting in agony, this flayed warrior ripped off its chains and knelt before Vect. "Give the Khan his sword. Now, attack." The broken, skinless Primarch of the White Scars had been tortured for thousands of years. The pain, both physical and psychological, had conditioned Jagtai to become Vect's lapdog, a weapon that truly did rival the Crone Swords. As the Primarch rampaged on, and the Eldari army began to gain ground, Yvraine and the Visarch retrieved Isha, and they began their retreat into the webway. To cover their escape, the craft worlds of Baal Tan and Dor High crashed with one another, creating a massive explosion, wiping out a vast expanse of Nurgle's garden. The Eldari had suffered greatly, but no cost was too great, for their goddess Isha is once again freed from Chaos's grasp. However, Yvraine can't help but think that this was too easy, and perhaps they played right into Nurgle's plan. But she had no time to dwell upon it, for now they must ready themselves to slay she who thirsts. Little did the Eldari know that the time of the Rana Dandra drew near. The Inari, the Drukhari, the Exodites, and the Harlequins amassed all they had to wage war. Wraith constructs were awoken, their avatars summoned, and the 5 crone swords of legend were given to their best warriors. Abandoning all fear, they entered the warp. For what did they have to fear when they had already successfully freed their goddess of rebirth, Isha, from Nurgle's grasp? The ethereal caste had a premonition that the hierarchy of the galactic powers was about to change. They then gave the order to all sept worlds to halt all sphere expansion efforts and to divert all attention towards the production of artificial intelligent drones and battlesuit systems. Heavy shield drones were mass-produced in the billions in order to shield their planets through an upper atmosphere network array. Pure-tide neural engram chips were integrated with advanced AI-piloted battlesuits as another means of defense. And then came the order of having 90% of the Tau population undergo stasis sleep. The Tau would simply not participate in these end times. They were to awaken to a new galaxy. Such was the decree of the Ethereals. A foolish decision, for in their hibernation, many of their auxiliaries left the greater good ideology. At first, few planets fell to the horrors of the void, until the Black Orcs figured out how to use their teleporters to bypass the defense grid. The renegade Oshova had long since cut ties to the Tau Empire, but upon receiving multiple distress beacons from sept worlds, he could no longer ignore his people. The Enclaves had been expert orc hunters, but these new Black Orcs were bigger, stronger, and much more durable than what they were used to fighting. Countless lives were lost, for the killing blow way of warfare that Farsight taught couldn't account for the destructive fury of these orcs. The war was lost, and the black tide swept across all of Tau-controlled space. Commander Farsight was the lone Tau survivor, the last of his race, all thanks to his relic, the Dawnblade. The immortal body of this hot-blooded warrior would forever battle against these black orcs, a ghost attempting to avenge a dead race. A heroic yet hopeless act. The death of the Emperor also meant that the Omnissiah was gone. The belief in the machine spirit drove the legions of Skitarii towards the stars to continue their search for an STC that could revive the machine god. Many Forge worlds were left empty as the Admech became a spacefaring faction. But Belisarius Cawl took a different approach. He integrated himself directly into the Martian Forge, becoming one with the planet. The unified Chaos Army cut a swath through any and everything in their way towards Terra. Entire worlds were swallowed by their ruinous maws, armadas torn to shreds, and in their wake, more joined their ranks by pledging themselves to the Chaos Gods. Chaos was only one step away from reaching the Imperial Palace, but they had to get through the sentient planet of Mars first. Guilliman and his forces ready to back up Cawl, but a Vox was sent out to tell them to stay back. Mars then began to quake, and the blood-red sands split open. From deep within the world's core, a massive arm burst forth. A roar heard across the galaxy signaled the birth of an uncharted Catan. The Void Dragon ariseth. As the ancient star god battles the demonic horde, more and more battle barges arrive, both traitor and loyalist. The war across Mars quickly becomes too destructive as many Titan-class war machines go apocalyptic. Guilliman notices that both the Forge and the Void Dragon are struggling, and he orders for all Imperial forces to push forward. Were it not that chaos is the weakness of the Catan, then perhaps they could have repelled the demonic horde. But the Void Dragon met his end at the hands of a demon Primarch. Lorgar, which was being buffed by Magnus's magic, beheaded the Catan with the use of Dracnian. The explosive backlash of a god's death sent a chain reaction of blasts all across Mars, and the planet could hold on no longer. Any Psykers still able to attempted to shield their forces from the planet-sized explosion that came, but it was for naught. Both armies suffered an excruciatingly high amount of casualties. Even more so perished in the ensuing black hole created in Mars's wake. Until finally, a heavily damaged Magnus managed to expel the black hole. Unfortunately for Chaos, Lorgar and Perturabo perished in the blast, but their demonically enhanced bodies meant that they'll emerge from the bowels of the warp once again. By the Emperor's grace, both Lionel Johnson and Roboute Guilliman survived. The Order was then sent out to regroup on Terra and prepare for what could be their last battle. But before they could assemble, Constantine Valdor voxed in, stating that the traitorous Primarchs had teleported before the gates of the Imperial Palace. The Custodes and Sisters of Silence were already in combat against them. By the time the Lion and Guilliman teleported to join in on the battle, most of the Custodes and Sisters were already dead. Only Mortarion seemed to have been wounded. Lionel Johnson unsheathed the Lion Sword, and Guilliman ignited the Emperor's blade. For the Emperor! At this point in time, the Supreme Grand Master of the 666th Space Marine chapter telepathically spoke to Valdor. With no other option left, the two agreed it was time, and the Terminus decree was enacted. With a single coordinated motion, everything changed. The galaxy erupted in golden light as the warp birthed forth a divine god of chaos, the fifth chaos god, the Star Father. The Emperor of mankind had been reborn through apotheosis at the great cost of human life. Untold billions of trillions of humans had their souls ripped from their bodies and into the God Emperor's army of the light. Entire sectors of space lost all of their human population. The Imperium had lost most of its inhabitants, but hope was restored. For a new faction was created to illuminate the shadows of chaos and bring order to the warp. The Star Father and his reborn warriors of light had arrived. Standing between the demon Primarchs and the Loyalists were three warriors: Saint Celestine, Ferrus Manus, and Sanguinius. The Emperor's angels had arrived. Angron and Fulgrim charged forward, but were pinned down by a hail of burning bolter rounds. All around them, the Legion of the Damned materialized. Zeech ordered Magnus to retreat, for this was a major unknown in the Changer of Ways' plans. Reluctantly, the spell was cast by Magnus, and in their retreat, a new age was ushered in. What is up, guys? It's the Sound Alchemist, part of One Mind Syndicate, and today I'm back to talk about Warhammer 40K. Now, if you guys checked out the video that I released yesterday, it was all about the end times of Warhammer 40K. So we've seen the end times of Warhammer going into Warhammer Age of Sigmar, and we've seen how fantasy can change and really get people mad. So The thing about Warhammer 40K and its end times is that I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, especially at the rate that notable events in the timeline is moving. Because when you think about things, like, it was very, very stagnant before 8th edition, and then the folks over on GW kind of started changing and getting more community friendly before they got all butthurt about fan animators. But anyway, back in 8th edition, they were moving towards a new direction, and the lore was expanding. We've got new Primaris Space Marines, a new Primarch returning, and things were changing pretty quickly. Or so it seemed, because after that happened, yes, the timeline was progressing, but things were moving very, very slowly. Certain little inklings of lore of what's to come was splattered throughout notable events, in between the lines of the codices and whatnot, and there was many, many theories going around. There's always been theories, such as the Sensei, the Star Children, the Emperor becoming a Chaos God of Order, and there's a lot of like little end time things such as the Wolf Time, the return of Jagtai Khan, and there's just so many things to explore in the lore, in the future of 40K, that I decided to take a crack at it. So a long time ago, I did a video on the shape of the nightmare to come. This was basically what Warhammer 50K and 60K was going to look like, and of course there's no way to predict the future unless you're a time traveler, but the warp is a very mysterious thing. So a lot of those things made sense at the time. Obviously we had no idea that Primaris Marines were going to be a thing, but that piece of fan lore really kind of stuck with me, and I almost took it as a little skeleton of sorts for you guys and for anybody at GW to kind of fill in with the organs, the skin and whatnot, and make it an actual thing. So with that being said, you guys can go ahead and check out that video. Like I said, it's really old, maybe like 4 years old, but it's a very, very good read if you do find it online. So I based a lot of things on that. I also have been reading up on a bunch of 40K theories, such as the Emperor manifesting into a god, what Abaddon and his crusades are actually trying to accomplish, what could happen if the Silent King came back, which he actually did, so I don't know about that theory anymore, and also the theory of the Void Dragon being a whole Catan, not fractured, and hiding underneath the Martian soil. So that's what I did, and it took me about 5 days to get it the way I wanted to, and I finally was able to publish the video. So go ahead and check out that video. It's called The Death of Warhammer 40K. And with that end, I was just trying to tie up a bunch of loose ends and create a starting point for Warhammer 50K. And the main tipping point, or the main catalyst for this, was the Emperor's Ascension and the Terminus Decree. So if you're not familiar about the Terminus Decree, rumor has it that the Grey Knight Grandmaster and a few select others know of this Pandora box of sorts. There's one on the Fortress Monastery on Titan, and there's another on the Golden Throne. Nobody knows what this is, but this is basically an end-all be-all Pandora's box that could cause one of many apocalyptic events, or perhaps it could be a means to equal the playing field against the Chaos Gods. So the whole lore and ideology behind that is that the Emperor has been in a near-death state for ages, and perhaps the Terminus Decree is a means for him to traverse his physical body and achieve apotheosis, and finally become the God of Light, the God of Order, the God Emperor. But of course this has to be Warhammer 40K, where everything's grim, dark, bleak, hopeless. So just like when Slaanesh was birthed and that psychic backlash messed up the Eldari, this would cost a great amount of sacrifice. Life would be the sacrifice. Untold billions upon trillions of Imperial lives would be sacrificed for the Emperor's Ascension. And it's supposed to really show you that, is this even worth it? because, you know, the Emperor preached science, logic over belief in gods and whatnot. Theism, thanks to Lorgar and his Imperial Creed, we now have the Emperor becoming a god. So, with the Imperium being heavily crippled with the loss of manpower and whatnot, this would affect the Chaos Gods as well, because they too would also be crippled since they draw most of their power from human emotion and actions. So now, when you think about the overall grand scale, you have the God Emperor and his army of the light fighting to stave off a weakened Chaos, while the rest of the Space Marines, Astra Militarum, Sisters of Battle, Custodes, etc. have other enemies to fight. The Necrons, the Tyranids, the Orcs. And I'll get into those other factions in another video, but for this one I just kind of want to talk about the Emperor and what this new state of the galaxy would be like. So this would really help push sales, because now you have a whole new faction to play around with. Essentially, you have the quote-unquote good Chaos God, his lesser demons, and his greater demons. But of course, since he's kind of the antithesis of Chaos, the Chaos God of Order, yeah, I know it doesn't make sense, instead of having lesser and greater demons, he'll have like angels and saints. So we could have a new, redesigned look for these warriors in the form of like the Legion of the Damned, where they look all on fire, but still emanate the light of the Emperor. They now have burning halos to show that they have been reborn in the image of the God Emperor. And we get Primarchs to come back. Sanguinius, everybody's favorite Primarch, who is maybe dead. At first he was confirmed dead, now it's, oh, he might be in stasis. But anyway, we get a new model for Sanguinius, which is a win-win. We get a new model for Ferrus Manus, because again, that is a 100% confirmed beheaded Primarch that we get back. And we get new and a more fleshed out lineup for the Legion of the Damned. Maybe a Chapter Master of sorts, dreadnoughts, vehicles, more units. And overall, I think that would just be a great start for a new faction that makes sense. And perhaps we could have like an avatar of the God Emperor that fights alongside them, so that way you don't have this amazingly overpowered god on your side. That kind of tips the scales, because if you are playing the Emperor, I feel like he's too overpowered to be in this game of 40k. Primarchs are already kind of teetering on that edge of like too strong, too expensive points wise, and it's like, should you even take one, or is it best to just get stronger units that are more better gameplay wise? But yeah, that is my thoughts. That is what I came up for, because the Imperium is really going to change after this. Since they have less manpower, they're going to have to find other ways to produce the same amount of like food, materials, like raw materials, that kind of thing. So it really gives you an interesting dynamic to explore, especially with the evolution of the rest of the races and how they react to a weakened Imperium, but also strengthened, because they have a new warp race that can literally travel without needing the Astronomicon, because they could just pop up wherever they're needed. I mean, look at the Legion of the Damned. So we're going to be starting off with what happened to the factions of the Imperium, beginning with the Astra Militarum, the Imperial Guard. So the Emperor ended up dying. The Golden Throne failed, and the Emperor could no longer sustain his life, and he perished. With the Emperor's death, so too did the Astronomicon fall. So without that guiding post for warp travel, humanity was severely crippled. Warp travel was used to get things from point A to point B in a matter of, I guess, seconds, depending on where they're going to. So really, faster than light travel is pivotal, especially if you're traveling in a freaking galaxy. The Astra Militarum was kind of stationed in various key points in the galaxy, or at least Imperial controlled space, so that if anything did happen to these planets, the Astra Militarum could get there hopefully in time. So because of this, the Imperium was forcing its generals to basically do the same amount of work and damage and repairs and whatever they needed to do, but with far fewer men, because it's just impossible to move that much army strength in a point-to-point basis. So because of that, the Astra Militarum was stretched far too wide, far too thin. Rations were being overused. It is just crazy how much you have to think about, the fuel, the living space, the food. What it takes to actually feed and keep an army going is astronomical, especially if what used to take, say, a week to get from point A to B, now it's taking years, and you just need that much more manpower, that much more food to keep your armies going. And because of this, so many regiments, they said, I'm done, and they ended up deserting the Imperium, or at least the Astra Militarum. So because of this, the Guard fell horribly. The whole regiments just quit. Yes, the commissars did try to keep them in line by shooting and just trying to do scare tactics and anything they could to keep the High Lords and the Inquisition from retribution. But that's not enough, because all these people were also in the same boat. So that's what led to tons of human civilizations to just fall and crumble because help wouldn't arrive. Say there was a catastrophic meltdown at a Ministorum building or something like that. If the world itself couldn't provide the aid necessary, then that's it. There's nothing they can do. They can pray, they can try and will something to happen, but chances are it's not gonna work. So because of that, the Astra Militarum, human civilization in general, was dying, just having a bad time. And because of this, certain High Lords needed their factions, their worlds to prosper, and this led to them allying with some not so nice chaos gods. So a lot of worlds became demon planets. A lot of worlds prospered by becoming cultists or demon hosts. But at the same time, the High Lords came out on top sometimes, but the human population was obliterated. So many worlds fell because of this. Other High Lords decided to ally with Xenos, and sometimes it was good, sometimes it wasn't. But at the end of the day, the Inquisition caught wind of all these High Lords trying to do whatever means necessary to prosper, and that led to a lot of assassins being sent out to take out these High Lords to kind of quell the masses and kind of stop all these revolts from happening, because a schism was forming. The Imperium didn't have the means necessary to keep humanity in check. Because, even though the Emperor died, it the news of it spread like wildfire. It almost seemed like chaos or something behind the scenes was giving this news to the populace. Humankind needed a means of hope, and some of them, again, kept to the Imperial Creed, kept praying to the Emperor as a god, and held on to their faith. And that's where the Ecclesiarchy made the decision to claim that the Emperor had whispered to them truths of what was going on, and that all these revolts, all these other worlds that were claiming to leave the Imperial Creed, leave the Imperium as a whole, that they were just cultists and that they were corrupted. So shrine worlds really became a beacon for a lot of pilgrims at this time. All these regiments of Imperial Guardsmen who had deserted made pilgrimages to these shrine worlds to basically say, hey, the Emperor had protected me for all this time. He's the reason why I'm still alive. He's the reason why I'm not just throwing my life away, serving for this commissar who would kill me without even a second thought. So shrine worlds really became a beacon of hope within the Imperium. And because of that, a lot of death occurred. Certain shrine worlds were used as a means of cultivating human lives. a High Lord of a Shrine World would pledge himself to chaos, have people come by the dozens, hundreds, billions to his world, depending on where it was located, and they could use all these humans' life as a sacrifice to their gods, be it through disease with Nurgle, war with Khorne, decadence and lust cults with Slaanesh, etc. So it was not a good time for humanity. And that's when the Sisters of Battle decided to step up. Some of them decided to, protect these shrine worlds as the last beacon of hope. Others, not so much. When the Emperor died, the miracles that he had gifted to the Sisters of Battle, the Adeptus Sororitas, were also gone. And with that, certain sisters lost their faith in the God Emperor. Seeing as that he's not omnipotent. If he was, then they wouldn't have lost their miracles. And so many Sisters of Battle actually succumbed to the whispers of the dark gods and became agents of chaos. So during this time, it was really a huge boon for chaos, because with the death of the Emperor, many worlds, many people in power decided to go from one god, Emperor, or one god, the Emperor, to many other gods, the Chaos gods. And because of this, chaos really did prosper. So we could see that the Imperium was just, they had their plates full already with the Tyranids, the Orcs, other Xenos, and then you had chaos, and now with the death of the Emperor, that was kind of the tipping point. So after the Emperor's death, humanity just basically tried to hang on by the skin of their teeth. Like, they were crawling, they were gasping for air, doing anything and everything they could to survive. And that's when the Space Marines, who at this time were autonomous, they were also, well, some of them decided to keep their vow to the Emperor and protect humanity. Others just said, you know what, fuck it, we're going renegade. We'll provide for ourselves, we'll fight for ourselves, we'll take a sector of a space for ourselves. And that led to a lot of Marine versus Marine wars. Ultramar stayed true to the Emperor, and they were another beacon of hope for humanity, knowing that, hey, the closer we get to Ultramar, the more protected we'll be. So with that being said, the Minotaurs and a certain High Lord allied together, and they took control of space. Certain Space Marine chapters went into the warp to try and reclaim the Emperor's soul from the Dark Gods. At least that was their belief. Other Space Marine chapters were too busy fighting off the Necrons, the Orcs, the Tyranids, the Eldar, to even have time to think about what's going on with the rest of the galaxy. They're over here just trying to, to slaughter in the name of the Emperor. So a lot of things happened, but probably the most notable that happened for the Space Marines was a major battle between the Blood Angels and Abaddon the Despoiler and his Chaos forces. So Abaddon came to bow to basically claim it as one of his demon worlds. He brought Kabanda. It wasn't I guess you couldn't say it was another crusade of his, like the 14th Great Crusade, but it was akin to it on a much smaller scale. However, with the aid of the Sanguinor, the Primaris Marines, and a few other Imperial factions, Bao survived, but at a great cost. The battle ended when Abaddon was killed by Dante, who gave in to the Black Rage and beheaded Abaddon with his own demon blade, Dracnian. So, with Abaddon the Despoiler dead, his soul taken up by the sword, the forces of chaos retreated, the Sanguinor bested Kabanda, and with no other choice, blood was spilled as Astaroth the Grim had to bring down his axe on his chapter master. So now, with the death of Dante, the Imperium had no leader to rule the Imperium Secundus, because as we all know, Guilliman was the overall commander of the Imperial army, but Dante was number 2. But in the death of this great ancient champion, somebody awoke. Deep within the core of the rock Lionel Johnson awoke and made his way over to Ultramar, and he basically said, hey, I'm back. I've got my angels. We are still going to be hunting the fallen, but I know that the Imperium is in disarray. Allow me to be another general in the Emperor's army. And at that point, that's when the Imperium kind of had like a second, I guess you can say a second wind of sorts, having another Primarch kind of aid them during this dark time. And that's pretty much what's going on with the Imperium just before the 666th day where the Emperor came back to life and the forces of chaos made their way to Terra. So again, guys, thank you for listening. That's kind of my interpretation. I know there's a lot of gaps that still need to be covered, and let me know your thoughts. Does this make sense? Would you like it if this is what happened in the future of 40k? And if not, let me know how you want 40k to continue, because after 8th edition we really have gotten a huge jump in the timeline of 40k. So eventually 50k will get here, and we'll see, for better or for worse, what it is. So again, guys, thanks for watching. Hit that like button, subscribe, comment, and as always, you can help support the channel by going to Patreon. And again, thank you. This has been the Sound Alchemist, part of One Mind Syndicate, and I'll be catching you guys in the next one. Peace.